Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here. It's what is it? It's Tuesday. I know it is. It's Tuesday, and we have a special guest. We have Marco Mangelsdorf. He's in China. Where are you in China now, Marco?
Well, a very warm ni hao to you today, Jay. I'm actually in the one-time capital of China during a number of periods of its history. It's a city called Nanjing, which is in Jiangsu province, not all that far from Shanghai. Tremendous amount of history, culture, tradition, and a real pleasure to be here.
That's
and
wonderful.
With you.
Yes, wonderful that you are there and we can talk to you. You know, there's so much to talk about, and I know we want to talk about exactly what you're doing in China, but I'd like to hold that till the latter part of the show and first compare notes with you about all the things you've been following at distance from China in Hawaii. I mean, there's been plenty of action in the energy department, and we should talk about that first because that's our first priority. So let's talk about something, you know, the follow-up on what we talked about last time. Last time, among other things, we talked about I guess it's the 2,700-page response that Hawaiian Electric filed on August 26th in response to the PUC's order for certain planning points. And I guess we knew even at that time that it was too early to figure out exactly what kind of ripple effect that response would have, I mean, the whole scenario would have. And now another couple of weeks has gone by, and maybe we get a better idea about exactly, you know, how this exchange between the orders and then the demands of the PUC and the response of HECO are going to play out in terms of the development of clean energy. What's your thought at the moment, 2 weeks later?
Well, this situation is still kind of akin to what I'll call a roiling boil, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon because, as you mentioned, it's going to take a considerable amount of time for this process to move forward in terms of what policies, new policies can actually be implemented on a deep and substantive basis. One of the things that we've seen over the past couple of weeks, and I kind of expected this and I'm glad to see it, is that Hawaiian Electric is moving forward with the process, or starting the process of essentially reprogramming who knows how many tens of thousands of inverters, the devices that change the DC power from a solar array to alternating current. They are essentially reaching out to all contractors who have installed PV systems over the past years and starting this process of reprogramming so that we'll be more nimble, more flexible, and ultimately support the grid in a better fashion, and just as importantly, as far as I'm concerned, should allow for more PV capacity to be added to the grids across the state. So that's kind of what's most tangible in the near term to me.
Well, somewhere along the line, you know, over the past couple of years, maybe even more recent, the past year or so, Hawaiian Electric has fallen into, what do you call it, disfavor, or at least visible disfavor with the PUC, and because of all the contention over interconnect and the photovoltaic and the dismay of the photovoltaic installers, there's been a lot of heat on Hawaiian Electric, and that heat, you know, I think it still continues. And I guess the question I would put to you is, has the response it filed on August 26th had a salutary effect? I guess it was intended, at least in part, to have a salutary effect, but do you feel that it has had a salutary effect?
Well, yes, I guess the direct answer to your direct question is yes, but it's just part and parcel of a much larger process that has multiple stakeholders and will continue to have multiple stakeholders across the state as we kind of feel our way into unknown territory in terms of how to integrate more renewable energy, more non-firm renewable energy into the state's energy project, so to speak, into the state's energy distribution system. And we are, as I think mentioned on a number of occasions when we spoke before, we are going where few, if any, American utilities at least have gone before. So there's something of a feeling our way through the dark and seeing what works and things we want to stay away from. But I mean, it's all part of this this process, which is going to unfold for the months and years to come. And Hawaiian Electric is, I think, working in good faith to try to address as many issues as possible in a timely fashion. But it clearly, whatever they're doing in the near term is not fast enough and deep enough for a number of interested stakeholders, and I get that. I mean, if you look at the press over the past just few days, I mean, there are reports of substantial losses of jobs due to slowdown in the PV industry, and I mean that's affecting people's lives in a very tangible and direct fashion. But I mean, I think I keep on circling back to, in my belief, that anything short of Hawaiian Electric simply opening their grid to any and all comers, anything short of that is going to still have them open to being criticized for not doing enough in a timely enough fashion. And that's, in my opinion, when you've got the public good, the public commons of a utility grid infrastructure, it has to be taken care of by one or more parties, in this case the utility companies themselves, with the oversight of the Public Utilities Commission, and they have a responsibility to the ratepayers and, of course, to their shareholders as well to stay healthy and profitable. And there's only so much solar that can be accommodated on a short-term basis as the previous limits are pushed past in terms of just how much distributed generation rooftop solar can be accommodated.
Yeah, I mean, it's really, I mean, too bad. I mean, one of the things I've been thinking about lately is the level of awareness in the state about energy. I mean, energy is not easy. There's a lot of technical involved, and it's, possible to have a lot of disinformation and misinformation out there. And there's, of course, Kuleana, where, a given industrial group, such as the Hawaii Solar Energy Association, is taking a whack at HECO on the basis that it can't do as much business as it wants, leads to a kind of a public lack of awareness, a public lack of education on the subject. I think people do knee-jerk positions on this based on what they hear from one side or the other, and they're not really able to make, discerning conclusions. And I feel, I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel the public is uninformed, and thus things are skewed, and thus people are down on Hawaiian Electric, but they really don't know the story, and therefore it's really important for you and me to have these discussions. What do you feel about public education? Do you feel that they do know? And if they don't know, what can be done to make them understand, so we get a public view of the matter that is more aligned with the realities?
Well, education, of course, is key, but and there's quite a bit of misinformation, and I think outright ignorance in the photovoltaic industry in Hawaii as well. And I think it is the education that you're proposing is competing against a stronger, much more kind of base feeling, and that is a feeling on the part of, essentially, according to the recent press reports, as many as 4,500 homeowners on Oahu who are in various stages of essentially for Hawaiian Electric to give them a response as to whether and when they can move forward with their planned PV system. So the response, the typical human response to being told no, you can't do that, or no, you can't have that, when you know darn well that you want to do something, you want to have something, that brings up understandable feelings of anger and frustration. And the anger and frustration are obviously very powerful emotions, and they have a tendency, those emotions have a tendency to cloud the mind's ability to consider more technical, more nuanced, more complicated positions. So I really think that's kind of the atmosphere that we're seeing these days. And if you look at the proceedings of last Friday's legislative hearing at the Capitol building.
Yes, let's talk about that. What happened?
Well, a couple of the Hawaiian Electric execs went up there and presented where they're at, so to speak, and where they're planning on going. And there were, of course, there was no shortage of interested parties from the PV industry, various advocacy groups, some of them based in Hawaii, others coming from out of state, that painted a very different picture in terms of challenging, if not outright attacking, Hawaiian Electric for being draconian, which is one of the words I read from one of my competitor companies there on Oahu, and just essentially how could Hawaiian Electric do this? How unfair it is, how unreasonable it is, and the apparent reactions from a number of our legislators essentially mirrored the unhappiness and the anger of the people in the industry as well as homeowners, because those two Hawaiian Electric execs came under considerable heat and fire by legislators who are essentially just recounting the frustrations or channeling the frustrations and anger of their constituents. So
it's politics. That's the way it works.
Well, it's politics, and it's also, and again, I'll fall back on what I said just a few moments ago, that the base feelings of feeling that something is unfair, feeling that you're being denied something that your neighbor was able to do a week ago or a month ago or 6 months ago, or half of people on your block have PV systems, and now you're the 51% or the 52nd percent on your block who wants PV, and you're being told no. I mean, I get it. I really get it in terms of the frustration, and it's just an incredibly challenging and difficult position that all of us are in right now, because we all want to move towards a more energy independent Hawaii. That's the mantra I've been hearing for the 38 years that I've been in this business in the islands, and it's just it's not as easy to get to where we all want to go as we hoped it would be.
Well, I think I think there's a sense of entitlement, as you say. People say, well, if my neighbor got it, then I'm entitled to, and you're being unfair because you're not letting me have it. And there's nobody's willing to get in there. I mean, none of the residents involved, and for that matter, the installers involved, are saying, we recognize that there's a limit. You can't have an infinite amount of photovoltaic going on the grid. Something is going to break, and the result will be disastrous, because we'll fry some equipment, we'll be blacked out, our society, our daily life will stop. I don't see anybody except you and me. I don't see anybody actually saying that. They rather make demands. And then you get this question of, why were we not told that there would be a problem in interconnect? And they blame the utility on not telling them that they should not be out there selling photovoltaic to the public, and that the public should not be out there buying photovoltaic. But I think everyone really has been on the same footing. Nobody could have anticipated the huge upturn in photovoltaic over the last year 2 and 3 ago. And I think it's unfair to say, well, although everyone knew there was ultimately going to be a problem, it's Hawaiian Electric's fault for not stopping these guys from doing their sales. I mean, they were frankly determined to do these sales, and they were selling really well, and really forcefully to people, and people were really buying. I mean, they were buying everything, including the spreadsheets that may not have been entirely accurate on exactly what benefits were going to be available over time. Anyway, so my point is that if the blame game is that why didn't you recognize that there would be a crunch over the ability of the existing infrastructure to accept this much additional photovoltaic, that has to be shared. That's not just one party. What do you think about it?
No, I agree completely. And Hawaiian Electric, I think, can be correctly faulted for perhaps the way things were rolled out September of last year, when they said no more PV systems should be installed unless you have prior approval, which, by the way, has been the status quo on Maui and Miko, Maui County, since July of 2012. And on the Big Island, it has been something similar in terms of, as far as I know, the vast majority of contractors on the Big Island were and continue to not install PV systems until they get utility approval. But somehow things took longer on Oahu for Hawaiian Electric to come up with a policy. And when they did announce that policy in September of last year, there was screaming to high heavens that how can you do this? This is so harsh, and why didn't you give us any warning, and so forth and so on. But I mean, the reality, in my opinion, is that that decision, that announcement was going to need to be made sooner or later. It should have been made, one could say, 6 months before or a year before. But I mean, whenever it was announced, the announcement that you need prior approval to move forward with a PV, grid-type PV system, it was going to elicit howls of protest. So, I mean, again, it goes back to a fundamental point, which I've made repeatedly, which is that you can only have so many PV systems connected to the grid, and that number is not definitive. I mean, the utility companies, not just in Hawaii, but across the country, across the world, have been trying to figure out ways to incorporate more and more and more rooftop PV. So it's an ongoing challenge, and you just can't allow free and unfettered access to a utility grid by any and all comers who want to hook up. And that's, I think, one of the things that I'm most disappointed about when I hear our elected representatives who just seem to have a hard time with that point. They're just channeling the anger, deep anger and frustration on the part of their constituents, but they're having a difficult time, in my opinion, grasping how a finite, limited grid actually works, which means you just can't allow anybody and everybody to hook up.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's Marco Mangelsdorf. He joins us by Skype audio from Nanking, China, and he's with Provision Solar in Hilo. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back, and then we'll resume this conversation and find out more about what's going to happen in the future, the way things are setting up. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on the ThinkTech Digital Series. The show is every Wednesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, and I want you to watch this show because I think that when we talk with artists on the show about what they do, how they do it, and most importantly, why they do it, I believe that it resonates within each of us, and we find something inside of ourselves that brings us closer to all of humanity. That's what arts are there to do, and that's what I'm here to do on this show. That's Center Stage. It's on every Wednesday from 2 to 3 o'clock. I hope to see you there.
Okay, we're back. We're live. We've had a little break. We're back with Marco Mangelsdorf, and he's in Nanjing, China. And we're talking about energy here and also in China. We'll take some time at the end of the show, talk about his experiences in energy in China on this trip. But Marco, in order to follow the track of the discussion, so I don't understand why there was all this tumult in the state legislature when only a few days before Hawaiian Electric, on time, delivered its 2,700-page report about how it was going to resolve these problems. Was this do you have a sense of what this hearing was about? Why then? Why now this hearing? And don't we want to see the 2,700 pages unfold? Didn't they come up with solutions? Don't we want to see how their solutions work? This seems like jumping the gun somehow. What do you think?
Well, I mean, the legislature, as representatives of the people, duly elected of the people, are representing the interests of the people. And they have the right, which I completely support, of course, both in principle and in practice, to be able to call hearings on any variety of subjects. It's a matter of public interest. So they're perfectly within their purview to do so. And they do this from time to time on various subjects. timely subjects, interest to the matters of interest to the public, and I think it was right and proper for them to do so last Friday, and it just allows multiple functions. One is for legislators themselves to be able to speak directly and get responses directly from execs at various companies, in this case Hawaiian Electric, and then it also allows stakeholders, homeowners, businesses, advocacy groups to be able to chime in as well. So to me, it wasn't so much jumping the gun on, oh gee, there's only been X number of weeks to digest the 2,700 pages. We want answers and results from Hawaiian Electric right now. Tell us where you're going to go in 6 months, 2 years, and so forth. But just to essentially express their concern about the current status quo and try to get a sense of what Hawaiian Electric is proposing to do, not just now, what they are doing, but what they will be doing in the near term and in the longer term. And I've looked through the presentation on the part of Hawaiian Electric, and they tried to do that. Now, whether it was satisfactory to the legislators, that's debatable. But again, it's just we can't move fast enough for a lot of people's desires, and unfortunately, I think that's going to be the case for a while to come because of the nature of a finite grid, and the nature of the technical problems that aren't just simply going to go away with the waving back and forth of some type of magic techno wand to take care of these very real and serious issues.
But it sounds like, I'm just drawing a logical beat on this. It sounds like that hearing was for the proposition that the 2,700-page solution wasn't adequate. Criticizing Hawaiian Electric for, not making it happen faster, bigger, better, not coming up with a solution that solved these problems immediately, and that's why the hearing was called, and was the discussion at the hearing, motivated by photovoltaic customers and installers who were not satisfied. That's what it sounds like, anyway.
I agree, and it's I completely support the legislature or the legislators doing what they consider to be their responsibility to represent their constituents. I think the likelihood that of a hearing like that was going to yield results where everybody was going to be smiling afterwards, I think nobody expected that, and it's a continuing part of this kabuki dance between various actors on the stage as they make faces and they put on their costumes and their makeup and make dramatic gestures, and it's kind of fun to watch in one sense, but at the same time, what kind of useful purpose it ultimately serves in terms of getting us to where we want to go, maybe that's perhaps more debatable.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's not likely to actually get us any further. The question really, though, and I'd like to conclude our conversation in this area with a discussion of what is likely to happen now. So Hawaiian Electric makes various proposals, because that's all it was, proposals. Am I right about what it's going to do to satisfy the demands of the PUC? And all that goes into the PUC. The PUC then has to, I suppose, approve these proposals, which may take some time. It always does take some time. And then upon approval, the Hawaiian Electric will move forward with what it proposed. So it doesn't sound like anything dramatic is going to happen, just by virtue of the regulatory process. It doesn't sound like anything dramatic is going to happen right away. And B, well, I'm just asking you, what do you think is going to happen here? How is this going to play out?
Well, in the near term, I'm most hopeful that in terms of on a tangible, practical basis, the utilities working with inverter manufacturers, which they have been doing for quite a while now, to be able to have these manufacturers program their inverters to be able to be more nimble, more flexible, and more able to actually be supportive of the grid in a better, more tangible way compared to the previous generations of inverters being made. That's something that is moving forward at a fairly rapid clip.
And that doesn't require a PUC approval. That can happen right now. Are you saying? Is that what you're saying?
To my understanding, that I believe that's correct.
Who pays for it?
And then the second, who pays for it?
Who pays for these new inverters?
Well, I mean, inverters have to be installed for new systems. I mean, it's an integral part of any type of PV system, grid PV system design. So it would just simply have new homeowners or business owners who want to go PV, they would have to purchase these inverters that would be approved by Hawaiian Electric and be able to be more nimble and more flexible. And so is that going to be tangibly more expensive than the inverters out there right now? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a nominal cost increase, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one bit of good news. The other bit of good news, and this is going to be more onerous and burdensome to companies like mine and many others like us, is to, over time, go back in the field to many of the inverters or many of the systems we have in our PV fleet, so to speak, and to reprogram, if possible, those existing inverters to new parameters so that they will be more nimble and flexible and be more supportive of the grid. So that's what's likely positively thinking in the near term. Battery storage, energy storage on both the utility side of the grid and also on the customer side, that's going to be a longer, more involved process. But it will happen. I'm absolutely convinced that it's just going to take longer.
Mm-hmm. Well, just closing it with your advice, what would your advice be to the players? What would your advice, for example, be to the public right now in terms of the flux of what's going on? What would you say to them to, I don't know, give them some comfort, I suppose?
Well, I don't think I could come up with anything, but if I could, anything that's really going to do all that much good. But I would, if I could, I would say, look, we need to take a deep breath and calm down here and realize that there are no quick fixes to going where we want to go, and that you know, as simplistic and trite as it is to say, life is not fair sometimes, but to be feeding into a relationship of antagonism and anger towards whoever you're trying to get something from or want to work out a deal with. I mean, that to me just kind of fundamentally does not make a whole lot of sense in terms of coming to an agreeable solution.
Okay, and I take it that advice to the public would be the same advice you would give to the installer community?
Yes, absolutely.
What about the PUC? What advice would you give them in terms of how to manage this issue going forward? You can always say Go ahead.
I was just simply going to say that I have a lot of faith in the three PUC commissioners. They're good folks. They are working very hard and very diligently to wind their way through, make their way through very difficult, challenging issues. Of course, not just in energy, but other areas that they are exercising their responsibility in the public interest to look after, whether it's transportation, telecommunications, and so forth, and that they will do the best, most diligent job that they can amongst them so many things that they have, and in my opinion, their overworked staff has on their plates.
And what about the legislature? Is your advice the same to the legislature? Should they be taking affirmative action here? Should they be conducting further hearings? Should they be adopting legislation? What?
Well, short of going the populist route of doing a public takeover of HEI and the electric utilities, which I believe one or more of the representatives have kind of alluded to, which I just don't see happening, no matter how much that would be kind of red meat to some aspects of some parts of the community. Frankly, I don't feel that there is a whole lot that the legislature can do, because what is playing out between the utility companies and the PUC is really where the game is going to be played. And I just don't see it as desirable, practical, or feasible that our elected representatives would essentially be forcing a utility company, any utility company, to do what the people want or the people say in terms of accepting any and all PV systems to the grid. I mean, they just should not do that, and they can't do that because this is something it's out of their domain, in my opinion. And a lot of them, I'm sure, legislators feel differently, perhaps, about that. But this is really something that's going to have to be worked out principally between the PUC and the utility companies and multiple stakeholders, of course, including the legislature and legislators. But it's not something. I guess what I'm trying to say here, Jay, to boil it down, is it's not something that can be mandated. You can't mandate that Hawaiian Electric, thou shalt take any and all PV systems that want to connect to thy grid. That's just not. It's not practical. It wouldn't be good, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, hearing you on this point, it makes me wonder whether some of the things they have in mind are constitutional anyway. It's probably a good idea for them to let it play out. The 2,700 pages going to take some time to digest on all levels, and they should read the 2,700 pages, which will take a while, and get some commentary about the 2,700 pages and analyze the 2,700 pages before they go off and start making legislation or otherwise getting involved. That's my thought. Anyway, I'd like to switch gears, if you don't mind, to your trip to China, because I imagine it was at least in part about energy. What are you doing in Nanjing, Marco?
Well, it's been a fascinating trip so far, Jay. I was fortunate enough to be invited to present a paper at an energy conference in the city of Qingdao, which is in Shandong province, north of Shanghai, and I in fact presented on how Hawaii is dealing with such high levels of PV penetration. So just to share with other conference attendees that there are parts of the world which are struggling with the amount of PV that has gone in, and I also was subsequently invited to a mayor's roundtable, which I attended yesterday here in the city of Nanjing, which, as I mentioned before, was former capital of China under the Ming Dynasty, and also early part of the 20th century before the revolution here. And that was a really incredible experience. The mayor of Nanjing, and this is a city of about 8+ million people, they're very concerned about pollution levels, and they're very concerned about how the economy for the city and for the region is dominated by heavy industry, from chemicals to oil to cement and other manufacturing and steel production. And those are very high energy intensive industries, and they also can be quite polluting. So there were somewhere around 20 invitees around this huge round conference table with a number of other attendees sitting at tables, a couple hundred of them or so, listening throughout the day. And the mayor and his staff were interested in getting insight and feedback and advice, essentially, on how to continue to move forward in a more green, sustainable fashion, trying to learn what other communities, other cities, other countries have done. So there were a number of Americans there, as well as Europeans, who were essentially having their advice solicited by the mayor and his staff, and it was really a fantastic experience. I can tell you that the risk of making a gross generalization, the Chinese know how to be absolutely superb hosts and show such a degree of appreciation and thanks for folks like me coming over and offering whatever little valuable or worthless advice that we can come up with. So it's truly been a fantastic experience, and China has, shall I say, a lot of work cut out for itself in terms of how to become less energy intensive and move more from away from high energy intensive industries to more high tech, which is going to use less energy. So it's an incredible work in progress, and it's just been fantastic to be here.
So did you have a chance to talk with them about, for example, the kind of technology that would ameliorate the interconnection problems here in Hawaii with PV. Did you have a chance to talk to them about that?
I decided not to spend too much time doing that. I certainly, it was part of my presentation in Qingdao, but the fact it's the notion of oversaturation of PV would be something that's incredibly foreign to them. Why? Because there's so little grid-type PV overall, especially rooftop PV, site-installed PV here in China. I kind of shifted my focus somewhat to emphasize how important it is to work closely with, in a cooperative, collaborative fashion with the local utility companies here, because I mean, they have a tremendous amount of power. The China State Grid is one of the 10 largest corporations on the planet in terms of revenue, and without being able to work closely with utility companies across China, both in the local, municipal, provincial, and national level, then the ability for PV to be able to provide much to the people here is very limited. So I decided to kind of shift away from a grid saturation to, you should learn from what we are doing or not doing adequately enough, which is to have a close relationship and do whatever it takes to work with utility grid operators and utility executives here, so that as things heat up, so to speak, as more and more PV goes in, it'll be easier and easier for that to happen, and there won't be both substantive and other annoying roadblocks to incorporate more distributed generation into the Chinese grid.
Mm-hmm. Now you've, in California, for a couple of iterations that I know about, you've taught courses in the California university system about energy and politics, and you've written articles about that, and I would say from my discussions with you that you are Hawaii's expert on the subject, and I wonder whether they called upon, whether the Chinese in Nanjing called upon you to discuss that subject of energy and politics, and if so, what kind of response did you get from them in an entirely different political system?
There wasn't a whole lot of discussion about politics. It was more practical. The discussion was more on practicality. Although I did. There was a Q&A with the mayor of a very bright and dedicated fellow, the mayor of Nanjing, yesterday, who attended for the entire day. After we gave our presentations, we opened up to Q&A, and one of the things I asked is, since there is so much power and influence that is being controlled and held by heavy industries that are often heavy polluters, what type of challenges or difficulties does he see or have as far as being able to enforce the whatever local, provincial, or national laws and regulations that are on the books to try to limit pollution?
Sure, that's a political question. That's a political issue,
yeah,
isn't it?
Absolutely. And he proceeded to, he answered it in a very diplomatic yet straightforward fashion, where he recounted that over the past year or so, and he's only been mayor for about 6 months, but in recent time, there has been, that his administration, so to speak, has been essentially closing down and more tightly regulating a number of factories and various industries. So he made it sound that this is something that he's taking action on, but he also kind of harked back to, and in something of an aside, he said, well, you know, you should really go and talk to the folks in Beijing about that, which is, you could take as kind of a perhaps implicit criticism, but what the takeaway I got from that comment is that there's only so much that the local governments can do, and that when it comes to enforcement, there's a big burden necessarily to be shared with the national government, the government in Beijing, in terms of dealing with some of these issues.
So interesting, and you know, it's we have to continue to watch that. So I hope you go back again and again, and we can catch up with you in or after every trip. Thank you, Marco. As always, Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar in Hilo, Hawaii. now in Nanjing at a conference at which he is speaking about how energy is doing in Hawaii to the Chinese. That's wonderful. I look forward to see you on your return, Marco.
Well, it's always such a wonderful pleasure to be with you from near and far, whether I'm in Hilo, California, somewhere in China, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, Jay.
Aloha, and xie xie, and sai jian.
Thank you. All that and more.
Take care.